Welcome to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit. On July 14, 2025, the U.S. abruptly scrapped its tomato trade pact with Mexico and imposed a 17% tariff. No warning, no buffer. Within days, prices soared and store shelves went bare. But instead of retaliating, Mexico rerouted its $2.8 billion tomato exports through Canada, launching a cold chain rail system that bypassed U.S. checkpoints entirely. What began as a tariff shock quickly evolved into a logistics masterstroke, reshaping supply chains, trade relationships, and market dynamics across the continent. Here's how this high-stakes tomato twist changed the game. Tariff Shockwave. U.S. abruptly ends tomato trade pact. On July 14, 2025, the U.S. Department of Commerce suddenly terminated the tomato suspension agreement with Mexico and imposed a 17% anti-dumping tariff on all fresh Mexican tomato imports. No transition, no negotiation. The Pact, first established in 1996 and last renewed in 2019, had set price floors and inspection protocols to prevent dumping. Its cancellation blindsided importers, grocers, and analysts who expected talks, not a hard stop. Officials claimed the move was necessary to protect U.S. farmers from long-standing, unfair trade practices. The Florida Tomato Exchange hailed it as a win, but the policy came amid broader trade tension. Earlier that year, Washington had already imposed sweeping 25% tariffs on most Mexican and Canadian imports. By mid-July, the average U.S. tariff hit a near-record 18.4%. With Mexico supplying around 70% of the U.S. fresh tomato market, worth roughly $3 billion annually, prices skyrocketed. Major cities saw increases of 30 to 45%, especially in midsummer when domestic yields lagged. A routine food item had suddenly become a geopolitical flashpoint, but the real pain wasn't just in produce aisles, it hit harder behind the scenes. From grocery bags to paychecks, the fallout hits home. The tariff's impact hit fast and deep. Major retailers like Walmart and Kroger passed costs to consumers, with tomato prices jumping over 10%, and even more in regions like Texas and Arizona. In some stores, a single pack doubled in price. School cafeterias and fast food chains cut back. In Illinois, one teacher recalled students asking, "Where's the red?" as tomatoes vanished from salads. Families relying on SNAP benefits dropped fresh produce entirely, opting for cheaper, less nutritious options. The economic pain didn't stop at the checkout line. In Florida, dozens of Latinx-owned import firms shuttered. Jobs were lost across logistics, from truck drivers to warehouse crews. Importers described the situation as a logistical roulette wheel, where pricing and delivery became unpredictable. Border hubs like Laredo and McAllen saw warehouses go dark. And in tomato-reliant states like New York and Minnesota, consumers faced higher prices, or no tomatoes at all. This wasn't just about trade policy, it was about livelihoods. From dinner tables to distribution centers, the fallout left no part of the supply chain untouched. But while the U.S. economy reeled, Mexico was already shifting into a higher gear. Before we downshift into Mexico's next move, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Whether it's trade twists or torque stats, Piston Pundit delivers the insights that drive your world. Let's keep rolling. Mexico's tactical detour, from tariffs to rail tracks. Mexico didn't waste time on diplomacy. It moved straight to strategy. In just 3 months, its agribusiness leaders partnered with Canadian Pacific Kansas City, CPKC, to launch a cold chain rail corridor that bypassed U.S. border controls entirely. Tomatoes now travel over 2,000 kilometers from Bahia through Chihuahua into Ontario and Quebec, preserved in refrigerated containers held precisely at 1 degree Celsius plus or minus 1 degree Celsius. This shift wasn't just about speed, it was about efficiency. The rail corridor slashed logistics costs by roughly 15% compared to trucking through U.S. checkpoints. It also added 4 to 5 days of shelf life, reducing spoilage and increasing value. CPKC actively marketed the route as bonded and customs-free, directly avoiding U.S. red tape. But more than infrastructure, this was about timing. As Washington turned up the pressure, Mexico engineered a seamless workaround. What started as a trade crisis became a logistics triumph. With speed, precision, and smart investment, Mexico outmaneuvered tariffs and redrew the map, quietly rerouting supply chains into a new tariff-free lane. But a cold train was only part of the story. Canada didn't just receive tomatoes, it signed on for the long haul. Canada steps in: certainty, contracts, and market share. Mexico didn't just find a new route, it found a long-term partner. Major Canadian retailers like Loblaws, Metro, and Sobeys visited Mexican farms, reviewed growing conditions, and locked in 5-year procurement deals running through 2030. In the words of one Ottawa official, Mexico didn't fight the tariff, they outgrew it. By 2026, nearly 48% of Mexico's fresh tomato exports are projected to head north to Canada, up from less than 1% just 2 years earlier. And it's not just tomatoes. The cold chain corridor's success has expanded contracts to include avocados, strawberries, and peppers, widening the agricultural pipeline. Canada responded with infrastructure. New cold storage hubs, like one in Windsor, opened fully booked into early 2026. Streamlined customs and rail logistics dropped landing costs by about 8% per crate, making Canadian imports not just stable, but cost-effective. As U.S. trade policy grew riskier, Canada offered predictability. In this quiet shift, Canada evolved from a backup buyer into a reliable trade anchor, and Mexico found a market ready to commit. But the implications didn't stop at Canada's borders. The world was watching and recalibrating. From tomatoes to trade routes, the global shift takes root. What started as a tomato detour is now reshaping global logistics. European ports like Rotterdam and Hamburg are drafting blueprints to bypass U.S. routes altogether, tapping into Brazil to Canada cold chain links and redirecting perishable exports northward. U.S. ports like Houston and L.A. are quietly losing relevance as alternate corridors gain traction. Meanwhile, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan aren't just watching, they're learning. Delegations visited Mexico's industrial hub of Querétaro to study how it rerouted trade without battling Washington. One Korean trade official called Mexico a case study in resilience. Even labeling evolved. By late 2025, Canadian firms began legally co-labeling produce under USMCA rules, product of Canada, with Mexican-grown goods, streamlining compliance and further embedding Mexican supply into Canadian shelves. Analysts now warn, if this model expands beyond agriculture, to auto parts, semiconductors, even medical supplies, U.S. economic losses could reach $69 billion over 5 years. Countries aren't waiting for Washington to stabilize. They're investing in new routes, new partners, and new definitions of reliability. Did the U.S. lose a tomato battle, or start a wider trade war it won't control? So where does that leave the U.S. in this high-stakes logistics chess match? Final gear: lessons from a tomato turnaround. This wasn't just about tomatoes. It was a strategic detour. A sudden U.S. tariff turned a grocery staple into a geopolitical pivot. But Mexico didn't punch back. It built forward. Canada stepped in with infrastructure and trust, while U.S. shelves were left empty and expensive. The bigger takeaway? In today's volatile trade landscape, it's not the loudest policies that win, it's the quiet, dependable logistics. Mexico's cold chain rail didn't just save exports, it rewired the map, and Canada became the unlikely anchor in a rerouted economy. Now let's hear from you. Did the U.S. overplay its hand with the sudden tariff? Could this model redefine how global trade avoids friction? What lessons can other industries take from Mexico's pivot? For the latest updates on the automotive world and more in-depth analysis, subscribe to Piston Pundit and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching and see you next time. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.